From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and in every Blue Sky episode, we'll be speaking to leaders, researchers, and thinkers whose stories and insights will remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. As we have in a handful of past Blue Sky episodes, this conversation takes a look at the world of work. Work is an area that can feed your soul, pay your bills, and give more meaning to your life. In some cases, though, too many, my guest would suggest, work is not enjoyable, and while it might pay our bills, we pay a personal cost that is unnecessarily high. She feels strongly that it does not have to be this way, so much so that she's written an entire book about it. Bree Groff is a workplace culture expert and author of the book Today Was Fun, a book about work. Seriously. She has spent her career advising C-suite leaders at companies like Microsoft, Google, Pfizer, Calvin Klein, Target, and Hilton through times of significant change. She's a senior advisor to the global consultancy SY Partners, previously served as CEO of Noble Collective, a consultancy exploring new ways of working, and holds an MS in Learning and Organizational Change from Northwestern University. She lives in New York City with her husband and daughter. I hope you enjoy this Blue Sky conversation with Bree Groff as much as I did. Bree Groff, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you on. I loved your book, Today Was Fun, a book about work, parentheses, seriously. And I'd like to start with your formative experiences with work. And when we're kids, we're not working ourselves, so those experiences tend to be our parents. And your mom was a kindergarten teacher, which I, as an old fogey, associate with kids screaming and sticky fingers. But your mom would come home and say, I have the best days. Can you reflect on that and the impact that had on you?
Yeah, absolutely. She really did have the best days. It was amazing to see because I would go in to school with her whenever we were different school systems. So I'd have a day off school and go be her assistant teacher. And I had so much fun. It was my first experience of quote unquote work, where she would tell me like, okay, grade these papers. And I'd be like, okay, well, and then at the end of the day, she would come home and say, I have the best days. I think she felt useful. She felt loved. She felt productive. There's something so magical about teaching in that you see the impact in front of your eyes, as opposed to so many, corporate roles where you're some middle manager and you don't never met a customer ever. So not to glamorize teaching, there's tons that's hard about it and they should be paid much, much more. But I really grew up thinking that work is a place to have fun. It's a place to build your skills, show off your skills to help other people. And that was my default assumption that I'm going to grow up and like my job.
So you also went into education for a time, but then got into consulting, and that, it seems, opened your eyes to the fact that not every job has best days like your mom's.
Yes. So, yeah, inspired by my parents after graduating with a degree in biology and psychology. I was like, oh, what do I do? I was like, maybe I'll go into teaching. And I had some really great days teaching. I loved that first career. There were many Fridays when I thought to myself, like, oh, I have to wait 2 days till I get to see the kids again, which sounds crazy that I was like wanting to skip over the weekend, but it was true. I only later pivoted into consulting when I started to get a little antsy. Like, what else is out there? What else can I learn? And only when I started via consulting, peeking into other cultures, other company cultures, did I see, oh, people are not having fun. People are not on Friday afternoons going, oh, I have to wait 2 days till I get back here. And it's everything that you would imagine. Like, I barely need to itemize the things. It's the back-to-back meetings and the policies and the performance reviews and the endless decision making, not having time to pee between meetings, all of that kind of stuff. And I thought, oh, these people are not having the best days. And maybe there's something to do about it.
So another way in which your mom had an impact on you is that sadly she got sick and passed away, and I'm sorry for your loss. Can you talk about what that impact was and how it shifted your perspective and ultimately led to this work?
Yeah. So fast forward to 2022, my mom was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. I took immediate leave from work. My father already had Alzheimer's. I'm an only child, so it was going to be me in it. Um, and honestly, it was an honor to take care of them for that time. I was really helpful or really grateful for, paid family leave and all of that. But it was about 9 months. And it was the first time that I was so close to the idea of mortality and watching the end approach in a way that was beyond like the theory. Sure, everybody dies. It really shifted my perspective. Sitting in the cancer center with my mom, it was just very clear what the goal was of the cancer center, which is more days, specifically more good days. Like the whole operation is just based around the value of a single human day, including Mondays. And yet I would talk to friends from work and they'd say, "Oh my God, can this week be over? Or when is this month going to be over? When this..." And I thought to myself, oh my God, work is making us wish away the one thing we're given in life, which is time. And what a tragedy that our relationship with work is is taking from us something that at one point in our life guaranteed we're going to wish we had more of. And so it felt like an emergency. Like, we got to stop doing this now. We have to value our Monday through Fridays like the finite resource that they are. And I decided, well, I need to write a book about this. And I actually have some professional experience, some academic experience, that I want to help the working world have better days.
It's beautiful, and again, it's one of those silver linings of a terrible tragedy, losing your mom, where you get this new perspective. And it seems to me you likely might not be doing this work if it hadn't been for that loss. You'd give anything to have her back, but that silver lining has resulted in this incredible work that you're doing. You do a beautiful job of summing up your ethos in these lines that I liked. We spend a third of our lives at work. Our lives should be fun. Ergo, work should be fun. To me, it's that simple. I think one of your challenges, I assume, is you're going against so much history. I mean, I think back to when I was a kid, and if I complained about my job, or when I was a young adult, complained about my job, I remember my dad saying, "Well, that's why they call it work." Right? So you're going after, generations probably of people that just like, or even like that work-life balance, which I bristle. I don't like that expression because I think work is part of life. How do you feel like you can take on this such an entrenched mentality?
Yeah. So what's tricky is I'm actually sort of trying to thread a needle, because this work is called work for a reason, is definitely one end of the spectrum. Um, right. You get paid because work is painful and people wouldn't do it otherwise, which is not true. You get paid because you create value. If you do it while having fun, people will still pay you. Uh, but there's that sort of transactional notion of work that, um, it's the point is not to have fun. The point is to do the thing and get paid. But I would argue that 5/7 of our lives each week is far too much to be like throwing away as the input to a paycheck or the input to a company's bottom line. There's also another end of the spectrum I'm fighting against, which is do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Which, like, I don't know, I know a few people who feel that way, and more power to you if you do. But also, one, that's a very high bar and makes people feel bad. Like, oh, I don't love all parts of my work. Am I doing something wrong? Also, it's a contributor to overwork because if your work is your life's passion and purpose, then why aren't you doing it all the time? Why aren't you devoting yourself to it more fully? And that's also not healthy. So I'm trying to offer a third way, a middle way in which work is just a nice way to spend our time on the planet. Work is actually like a cool thing to do while we're hanging out with other people on the planet. It can be a source of fun. And that's plenty. It can feel meaningful. It doesn't have to be everything. But also, we should value our days enough that the quality of that time feels good.
At a young age, Bree Groff was inspired by her mom, who came home happy from her job as a kindergarten teacher. Bree taught for a while as well and enjoyed the work, but a move into consulting allowed her to see just how miserable so many are in their professions. Then she watched her mother being treated for terminal cancer and realized that this was all about getting as many more good days as possible. A silver lining in this difficult experience was Bree's conviction that we spend too many hours of too many days miserable at the workplace, and she has set out to do something about it. Now, back to our conversation. I've long been a believer in what you're talking about. I ran a business at one point where we put together a mission statement, and I still remember number one was we work hard and value having fun. And I remember when we wordsmithed it, we played around. We didn't say, but we value having fun. We said, and we value having fun. And I think one of the things you are also up against, one of the mindsets is that you can't be productive while you're having fun. You can't, if you're laughing, you're not working. If you're smiling, it's the old George Costanza when he's trying to look busy. He's like, all right. And I think I've seen it in action when people are having a good time with each other. I think they tend to do better work. Do you have research to support that? What do you say to the people who say, quit laughing, get back to work?
Oh my gosh. So, yes, first of all, when I tell people I have a book about having fun at work, usually people go to like, oh, happy hours, offsites. Like all they can think of is like, well, obviously fun is not in the work. So it must be around the work. Like it comes from this very, like, as you say, sturdy idea that work itself cannot be fun. But I argue, well, as we've talked about, like work is just creating value. Like that actually is fundamentally fun. And yes, there's tons of research that says things like employee engagement, even having a best friend at work drives business outcomes. Gallup has a ton of research here around this. I'm also of two minds of that research. So on the one hand, I think amazing that we're doing this research to show employee engagement, having fun at work. There's even employee surveys. It's now a question that says, at the end of the day, I can say I had a great day most days. Like all of that will drive business performance, even things like as obscure as inventory control. You can Google Gallup's research on this. So that's amazing that we can show engagement drives performance, but also engagement drives I'm enjoying my life outcomes as well. So there's some degree to which when I hear, well, fun, sure, but is it doing anything for the business? Sometimes I think, well, what are we really trying to optimize here? Are we only trying to optimize business performance and people's rest and engagement is only good if it's producing something? Or is the quality of people's days at work important unto itself? And I'm also trying to make the case that we, the humans, invented work. So we, the humans, should probably be enjoying it.
And one of the things I think we do to reinforce this sort of split between our home life and our personal life and our work life is literally the gearing up, putting on the suit of armor, putting on the outfit the uniform when we go to work. And if I'm guessing if I went into ChatGPT and said, draw me a picture of a professional man, he'd be wearing a tie, tied really tight, which is awful. And once you stop wearing them, you can't imagine why you ever did. You write quite a bit about that, about dress code. Can you talk about that and why that's important?
Yeah. Well, I think dress code is like this external proxy for how we feel we need to show up. So, yeah, I write about dress for joy, dress for joy and comfort and function for the same reason that if I'm having surgery, I don't want my surgeon in a suit. I want my surgeon in scrubs. Like scrubs are sanitary. That's why they use them. They're also comfortable. Like we don't need, I don't need the Armani tie. Like, please just do whatever is going to make your brain work best. But somehow we lose that when it comes to professional settings. And there's this need to show up as bigger than we are. Um, there's a little bit like I try and give credit where credit is due. Like professionalism in many ways is a statement of I've prepared for you or I'm giving you my best. But also I think it's more harmful than it does good because when we have to dress professionally with the tie, all buttoned up or the high heels, it also tells our brain I can't it's I am not enough by myself. My If I sit here comfortably in clothes that fit me better, that don't strangle me, that don't give me blisters, that's not enough. I have to show up as some sort of more polished, palatable version in order to be taken seriously. And in doing so, we often not only get dressed up in our business outfits, we put on our business masks, right? And it's that sort of it's the way of speaking, of say using the jargon, will get a head nod. It's not saying anything like, "Oh, yeah, I was feeling sick over the weekend, or I have to pick up my kid." It's like, "No, no, no, that makes you a human. Hide that." That's the ultimate not safe for work content. Uh, and it saps our joy because if we don't feel like ourselves, then we are not enjoying ourselves.
Agree completely, and I think it's highlighting for me. I've never been a huge fan of the expression work-life balance because there's usually like a slash between those two, and it's literally like this white line between the two. So, like, let's go back to the guy wearing a tie. You get done with work, you get in the car. What's the first thing you do? You loosen your tie. Yeah, now it's life. It works over. Now it's life, right? It's not a balance at all to me. It all comes together. And you mentioned before, I want to go back to this. You mentioned if I'm having surgery. One of my favorite parts of your book is this great example of this idea that, well, work is serious, so you gotta dress up. You shouldn't be playing music or anything like that. I actually witnessed, and you talk about this in the book. I witnessed someone I know doing surgery, performing surgery with rock and roll music playing with and by the way, this was heart surgery. This was so if you want to talk about serious work, this was serious work. But they had figured out as a group that this was how they did their best work. Like you said, they're wearing loose fitting clothes. Obviously, it's sanitary and all that stuff. But if a heart surgeon can do it, then you and I can, as long as I'm not bothering the person next door. Now we all have headphones and stuff like that. Can you talk a little about that? I love that example.
Yeah. Yeah. I cite Dr. Peter Attia here, who's the author of Outlive.
Serious guy.
And serious, right? And he's a former Johns Hopkins surgeon. So he tells this story about how in the OR doing kidney transplants, they would listen to clips of Napoleon Dynamite, which if someone people don't know, it's I think an early 2000s like super quirky classic movie. Right? And as you say, there's no more serious workplace than that. But what it speaks to, so first of all, let me say he attests that over 3 days they did 13 kidney transplants while listening to Napoleon Dynamite, and everyone had a remarkable achievement outcome. So this is not hindering performance. And in fact, like you can not that you want to do a randomized control study on surgeries in Napoleon Dynamite, but you can almost feel it instinctually. Like if you are laughing, if you are smiling, you're relaxed, right? Like I'm no surgeon or no doctor here, but you could imagine like adrenaline levels are lowered, cortisol levels are lowered. You're able to focus. Your muscles are relaxed as well. Like there's my argument is that there's so many ways that we want to sort of perform professionalism and doing that in a suit. But really, the only thing we should want is what are the things that make our brains work best? Like, if for knowledge workers, at least. And so, what are those things? Those are things like getting enough sleep, listening to music or things that make you laugh, being in comfortable clothes, having time to eat a proper meal, right? Like blood sugar being stable, good mental health, like all of these things that are the first things out the door in a professional setting when you're like, oh, I didn't have time to eat. I had back to back meetings. I haven't gotten out to even see the daylight or to walk or move or anything. It's like, my God, we need to think of ourselves like brain athletes, whereas athletes treat their bodies impeccably. If you're a knowledge worker, you need to be treating your brain impeccably.
I'm glad you mentioned athletes too, because I was thinking as you talked about smiling, I used to do a lot of road cycling, and there's a trick they teach you that if you're climbing a hill and you're working really hard, don't grimace. You're wasting a bunch of energy, and if you watch a lot of endurance athletes, they'll do this either rarely a smile, but just sort of this really calm, placid face, because you don't want to waste energy on the grimace and the tightness. You want to be using the energy where it matters, getting you up the hill. In Bree's book, she makes the case that having a team that enjoys what they do can increase engagement and ultimately enhance the company's performance. This flies in the face of the belief of many who equate fun with goofing off. Bree acknowledges that there will always be times of drudgery, longer hours, challenge, and disappointment, but balancing all of this with a spirit of joy and fun goes a long way for everyone's personal health as well as the organization's bottom line. Getting back to Bree, to open this next segment, I tried to anticipate the skepticism I'm guessing many of you might be feeling as you listen to our conversation. You know this and I know this, Bree, but there are people listening right now who say, this is all well and good, I buy it, but you haven't met my boss.
Yeah.
I can't wear whatever I want. I can't listen to music. What's your advice to somebody who is hearing this conversation, then goes and reads your book and closes it and still says, oh, okay, so how am I going to talk to my boss about this?
Yeah. So I'm not out to get anyone fired. In any professional setting, there's going to be different tolerances. As much as I would love to talk to that boss, because even the very buttoned up bosses secretly want to be having fun at work. It's just they too have been shaped into believing that the way to succeed is to show up in this sort of formal, strict way. But anyway, what should you do? You just sort of start small in ways that feel safe, often with what I call micro mischiefs. So, you know, say you work in finance and you have to wear the button down and the tie. I don't know, try a funny sock. Is it really going to get you fired? If you're good at your job, no one got fired over a flamingo sock. Um, the other thing to do is see if you can find a friend at work where you can feel 20% more yourself. Work friends have shown to increase engagement significantly and retention. So not only is it good for the organization for people to have work friends, but you can always find that, or hopefully find that one person where a meeting is going off the rails and you can send them a DM with a wink or oh, OMG, what's happening? The reason I bring it up is because what I always look for people are what are the channels where you feel 20% more human in yourself. If that's with a certain person, or on the days that you work from home, take a page out of the pandemic book and wear your pajamas on the bottom if you want to. It's just like a mini act of rebellion and a statement in my experience matters, and I'm going to show up as myself. I often find that if you push the boundaries a little, usually nothing bad happens. It's just a lot of it is in our heads. So if you show up one day with like a hoodie over your button down, I don't know, see if you get a talking to. Probably you're just going to inspire people around you to be like, "Oh my god, I want to do that too."
Right. Yeah, and you also talk about leaders and leadership, and one of the things you said I really liked was you encourage leaders to start with generosity, start with assuming the best, because again, a lot of this pushback from leaders is, well, fun equals goofing off, fun equals lack of productivity. But it seems to me if you hire well and you got the right people and you start with a generous attitude, they're going to deliver for you. Is that a fair way to describe the way you think about it?
1,000%. Yes. I think we have the model of extraction backwards in organizations. So the very typical capitalistic model is the company or the leader tries to pay people as little as possible and extract as much work as possible. And then vice versa, right? The individual tries to get paid as much as possible and do as little work as possible. Now, that's like the capitalism model, but that's actually not really how humans function. I've interviewed hundreds of employees. I don't think I've met one who was like, I'm trying to get away with as little as possible. Like, not a one. And I'm an external consultant with privacy like embedded into the interview. No, everyone's like, I'm just trying to do my best, but this is sort of in my way and this is confusing. So if leaders can first assume my people are interested in the work, they value their career, they value doing a good job, and they're here, sure, to earn a paycheck, but also because they have some degree of commitment to if not the organization, to the team or to the customer. So if we can assume people want to do a good job, then it's no longer the leader's job to try and sneakily extract more out of people. It's the leader's job to support their people in doing their best work. Because whenever I show up like that on a team, like, what do you need to do your best work? I'm here for you. Oh, we had a meeting get canceled. Do you want to just go take a nap? We worked really late last night. Like, my job is to protect the sleep of the people. And then in turn, the team is always like, Bree, we've got your back. Bree, we care about the client. I'm going to show up for you because you show up to me. And now you have this cycle of generosity as opposed to a cycle of extraction.
Right. And you mentioned naps. I'm very pro nap. Naps, it's like throughout human history, the afternoon siesta, it is proven time and again, but there is a stigma if you get caught falling asleep at your desk or whatever. But there are employers now who actually have nap pods that you can reserve and stuff like that. It's amazing. I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic because there's just so much, we're not that far removed from it. Hopefully we're completely removed from it. But there's so much you flash back and think about that we learned or haven't learned. Obviously, a huge outcome has been more remote work, and I'd like to talk about that. But one of the things I just thought of when you mentioned, you're wearing pajamas or whatever, it also brought work into our homes in an interest for others. So right now I'm talking to you, Bree, and you have family pictures behind you. People were zooming from their kitchens with stuff on the refrigerators and with a poster of their favorite athlete behind, or whatever. It actually kind of broke down those barriers in a kind of an interesting way. Is that something you've thought about or you think was a beneficial thing as we look back?
Yeah. I loved that part of it. And I think a lot of people did too. At first there was a lot of blurred backgrounds. And I get it, like if you're entitled to share what you want to share, but also the people who felt good enough, safe enough to just be like, well, that's my laundry.
Yeah, right.
That's my kid in the background.
The cat's jumping on their head. Yeah.
Right. It's so humanizing. And ultimately, that is at the core of what I think would create better days across our culture in workplaces. The more that we can step into our humanity, like I am a human who has laundry that's undone. I have a human who has a cat. I am a human who has a kid who's yelling in the background. from humanity and sharing that with each other also comes empathy of like, I no longer think of you as like, oh, Bob from communications never returns my emails on time. It's like, oh, Bob from communications, like, oh, he's got four dogs in the background and he's probably walking his dog and I'm going to nudge him again. Bob, get back to me already. Stop. And now it's like we have a different relationship. Um, so I think it was great. One CEO of a Fortune probably 100 company, I remember said to me early in the pandemic, Bree, now we're all in the same size box. And I was like, this like uber powerful man. I just thought it was a really beautiful reflection. We all get the same size box on the screen.
And talk about humanizing. I'm thinking back to, and I would be willing to bet you saw it if you can remember it. There was a guy who was being interviewed on the BBC and they were talking about
Yes.
serious heavy. I mean, the greatest thing ever. All of a sudden the kids start bopping in and one of them's in a walker and the mom is in there grabbing them and trying to slam the door. And finally they both started laughing. And it was like, you know what? Obviously he's at home. He's got kids. And how funny was that they actually broke in? And I think it went viral, not just because it was funny, but we could all relate to that, or anyone certainly with little kids. It was a kind of a beautiful moment, unintended. And I think the guy, like a year later, he came back on and reenacted it or did something. But I think that was, as we think back to some of the worst parts about the pandemic, those little moments, I think, were really helpful.
Yeah. Oh my God. I loved that video. It's like, because all it's doing is it's just taking off the business mask. Like he was forced. He had his business mask pulled off for him. But eventually when he cracked a smile, it's like, oh, this super professional guy talking about the war somewhere, he was some economist or something. Like, oh, he's just a guy, and like the whole world needs more of it, is to see each other as humans and not as enemies or as, incompetent people that we work with. It was wonderful.
I like Bree's concept of micro mischief, ways of expressing ourselves that might be slightly outside the norm. And it certainly is helpful to cultivate friendships at work and to understand who it is who might be on the same wavelength as you when it comes to your sensitivities and your sense of humor. I also believe that good managers should take stock in their employees' well-being, not taking on too much or invading personal lives, but having a sense for when people need a break, more sleep, affirmation, you name it. We all come to our work with our own struggles, and being in an environment that acknowledges and cares about that can help us do our very best work. And if that includes naps, of which I'm a fan, then so be it. Now, to the final segment of my Blue Sky conversation with Bree Groff. You talk a lot about joy at work, but as we all know, in the old days, at work meant at your building with all your colleagues in the next cubicle or whatever, and that has changed dramatically since the pandemic. What sort of advice can you give to people who are working virtually about adding joy to virtual work?
Yeah. So the first thing I always say is that physical distance does not imply emotional distance. That some of the strongest, most highest performing psychological safe teams I've ever had were during the pandemic when we were all working from home. One of the reasons you can have such a strong team remotely is because you do get a window into people's lives. Right. Like there's a way in which you show up at the office and you show up, like you show up with your professional persona on. You sort of obscure the fact that you have like a dentist appointment or kids or any of those things. But at home, you get that window into people's worlds. And I think that's what the pandemic really showed us. So working from home, the trick though, is to make sure that you are still embedding moments of humanity in a virtual setting that might come more naturally in a physical setting. So I'm a big fan of the check-in, which is a ritual at the top of a meeting. how are you scale of 1 to 5, everyone share in 30 seconds. It's it's like a structured way to replicate some of that, like, oh hey, how are you by the coffee machine. So it's just a little bit of extra effort, but there's so much upside.
And I assume too, one of the upsides I've seen is taking some of the things that diminish joy at work is getting physically to work, the commute, the traffic, the train that broke down, whatever. If you can take that out of the day, because I can remember working in Atlanta back in the 90s when traffic was becoming an issue and having 9 a.m. staff meetings and people show up at 9:30 so stressed out because it took them an hour and a half because of the accident on 285 or whatever. That seems to me that there's some pluses there, that just sort of literally physically getting to this workplace gets pulled out of the equation.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to go from your bed to a desk in like like that is, and frankly, this is coming from a person, like, I actually really like being in an office. Like, I like the three dimensionality. I like seeing people, I although it's, you got to like judge your audience. I love a good hug, for the right person. Like, that's all really nice. And yet there's it's just different environments. And I think what's most important about the return to office debate is, like, really the underlying all that is a conversation about power. Who decides where I work? Who knows how I work best? Um, and when, and what effect is that having on my life? It's one thing to choose to go into the office, even though you're going to have to arrange for childcare or someone to walk your dog or like all, but it's another thing for someone to make you and feel like you're being torn away from something. So that, I think, is the important conversation. Like, who gets to decide? Because I think ultimately the biggest downside of return to office is that it's kind of infantilizing. It's sort of speaking, it's like, no, you don't know best where you work. We know best. Or it's like, it's very saturating to a leader's ego to feel like, oh, my people are around. So um, I always say, like, if you want people to come into the office, like, there's actually a pretty easy way to do it, which is just like, be a cool place to hang out. And it, right, like, not necessarily ping pong tables, but like, are you the leader or manager or colleague? Like, are you fun to hang around?
Yeah, right.
That's, yeah,
Exactly.
goes a long way.
Okay, so you've been at the promotion of this book for a while now. It's been out, it's in readers' hands. What's the response been like? What have you felt coming back from readers, from hosts like me on the shows you've done? What's that been like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for better and for worse, I just learned I'm sold out in the UK.
Nice.
So,
Congratulations. Good problem to have.
good problem to have. Yeah. So, I mean, the response has been really great. I was very lucky to have a front page of the Guardian splash of an article over there, and a few other UK pieces. So, it's been great to see people excited about it, want to pick it up. In terms of like content of responses, my favorite bit of feedback is that it feels refreshing. I love that word because that was like, there's a million and one books out there about culture and employee engagement. And I'm like, the world maybe doesn't need another one. But what I tried to put into it is like a very human point of view. I write in the way that I speak, like, it's written in these little short vignettes. Feels a little bit more like social media content in that way. Like, you can read half a page and come away with something interesting. Um, and so that's sort of like, it's easy to read, it's fun to read, it feels refreshing. That's all felt really good, and yeah, probably maybe my more common bits of positive feedback.
Well, and I would say too, as someone who's read the book, you also write it as a practitioner. You're not an academic who has studied this. You've studied it, but you actually live it. You still live it. You work with teams. You've worked in organizations. You know what it's like. And the firsthand experience, to me, brought a lot to the book.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I write about the practices I've done 10,000 times. Like I have lived them enough to know like, oh, this really works to create a happy team for others and for myself.
So as you look at the future of the work you've done and what you hope to see in the workplace, do you sense that there's a tailwind that you've sort of jumped into, that there's momentum towards a world that looks like the one you describe in the book, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Frankly, all those Gen Zs out there are giving me life because I think my perspective is so I'm an elder millennial myself, but and famously the most burnt out generation. Although I don't know, maybe Gen X would argue with me about that, but it's ref- refreshing, encouraging to see a generation both struggle with a really tough job market and still want to put boundaries around their life and still value their mental health and life beyond work. And so much of the book, actually, that's one bit of feedback that I've gotten on one of my like 3-star Amazon reviews said, "This is for a younger crowd." This is
Ah,
how I was like,
in my
I guess
day.
maybe,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Um, yeah, but it feels encouraging because that's the world that I hope to usher in. And I think with a rising generation of leaders who question the model of paying your dues, I think and hope and know that the book is a really helpful guide for how do you build a career in that using that model.
Absolutely. Well, I can endorse this book as someone on the probably the older end of your reading group, Gen X, I guess. It's called Today Was Fun, a book about work by Bree Groff. You've been a terrific guest. You've been very patient with our various technical issues doing this interview. I thank you for that. And I wish you nothing but success with this book and all the work you're going to do going forward.
Well, I'm glad to be a fellow optimist alongside
Yes,
you. Thank you so much for having me.
my great pleasure. Thank you. If you've listened to many episodes of Blue Sky, you may have noticed that I'm personally very interested in the work from home versus in the office debate. To be honest, I tend to come down on the side of more together time in the office than less. I do believe that in-person interactions can carry a different energy than virtual ones, that teamwork can be built by gathering in the same space, and that newer, younger workers can learn from the examples of those with more experience, and that this is harder to do in a virtual environment. That said, the arguments for virtual, as Bree has outlined, are strong as well. And as someone who has aged into the "hey kids, get off my lawn" generation, I have to have a healthy respect for the views of younger people like Bree. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky conversation with Bree Groff. Before you go, it would help us out a lot if you'd leave us a rating or review. And consider subscribing to the Blue Sky podcast and following the Optimism Institute on social media to be sure you never miss a future episode. This and all Blue Sky episodes are made possible by the incredible editing and mixing done by the remarkable team at Sound On, Sound Off. You can learn more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. All graphic design and cover art for Blue Sky and the Optimism Institute are provided by Crush Graphics. And that's Crush with a K if you'd like to check out more of their fantastic work at crushgraphics.com. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke. And I thank you for listening.